try to stay out of there. I don't go anywhere near there. Because the few times I've always had bad experiences in Atlanta.
Yeah, usually.
So what the heck do you do? This is
my parents still don't even know what I do, but
yeah, mine don't either. I have no clue.
So I'm in the sustainability space. And primarily what I do is work with manufacturers who make products. And so we do a lot in consumer products, but we do a lot in the building sector. And so my clients would be like, people who make roofing, people who make concrete. I might work with a concrete producer, a cement producer, an aggregate producer, and a slag producer.
Yeah.
And most of our work is helping them either meet some sort of requirement, whether it be like I'm working with a contractor like a Turner, and they have a lot of like LEED requirements. Mm-hmm. And so my products have to jump through hula hoops in order to work at that building, at that project. In certain states, that's regulated now. So like California has requirements that concrete, steel, glass, insulation all fall under a certain carbon footprint in order to be eligible in the state of California.
Really?
And now the federal government has the same thing for concrete. Like if you want to sell concrete to the federal government, you have to show them that based on your compressive strength and then curing time, that you fall below like a specific carbon footprint. So it'd be like a girl saying, I don't date a guy that's over 250 pounds.
Yeah.
That's basically what the federal government did with concrete.
Well, I feel like that women don't date men over under 6 foot because I'm just ruled out.
Well, that's another way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even within a stone's throw.
Size or height, whatever. Yeah, it's a step, right? And so that's what they've done.
What is LEED? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So LEED's like the most popular brand of green building in the world. I think the stat line is 80% of of building projects over $20 million use a rating system like LEED. And so it's a set, think of like a scorecard, call it 100 points. You have to do certain things like manage your waste, manage the site, buy certain types of products. You accumulate so many points, and then you could be LEED silver, LEED gold, LEED platinum.
Yeah.
And the business case for that is, owners like LEED buildings or green buildings because one, they get a big plaque when you walk in the door. So that's probably where you've seen LEED the most, right?
Yeah.
And then, there's data that suggests that, LEED certified buildings get higher rents. Or, if I'm going to lease my, space to, a big corporate, that maybe I'm competing better for that, for them as a tenant. Or maybe they have requirements that say
ESG requirements and
exactly. Like, hey, we can only lease space that's LEED certified.
The funny thing is though, as a consumer of LEED buildings, I walk by the plaque, I'm like, oh. And then I walk into the building.
I don't know if it's necessarily for you. I think
it's not. Yeah, it's my point. I think it's for other people because it's like I see it all the time. I'm like, good for them. And then I go into the building and do whatever I need to do in that building.
Move on.
Yeah. So it's but it's like a brand of. So is it a private company?
It's a nonprofit.
A nonprofit.
So it's a nonprofit organization based in DC. They sort of were, if you go back in history, they kind of helped advocate for, improving energy efficiency in buildings. So that was, the original, we're in this weird sort of pivot about what do we know about buildings and what are we trying to do with buildings related to, climate, sustainability, ESG. So the old school topic, which LEED originally addressed and then helped drive things like Energy Star and, green codes and other things like that was, we didn't really make buildings in a way that conserved energy or even cared about energy, insert increased price of energy, recognize that, we didn't have the building technology that we do today in order to lower the operational impact of buildings. And so that's what LEED sort of did was create criteria to, tighten up the building envelope, thicker windows, better roofing systems, better, airflows and air cycles in terms of, the MEP systems and things that go with that. And they've had massive success in that. The way we build buildings today, for the most part, in high performing environments are better than the buildings that we used to build. the part two of that story now is where we are is we're starting to look at the carbon impact of the building materials that go into building. So the story sort of goes, imagine a teeter-totter. On the left side of the teeter-totter is operational carbon, energy efficiency type stuff. On the right side of the teeter-totter is the carbon footprint of all the materials, all the concrete, the steel, the glass, the flooring, the roofing, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, the teeter-totter was the heavy side of the teeter-totter was the operational carbon. But as LEED and other programs like that have reduced that burden, the teeter-totter sort of balanced out. And so now there's all this topic about embodied carbon. It was a huge component of the Inflation Reduction Act. There's money all over the place to decarbonize buildings, and really the focus is on materials. And that's how we tie back to that concrete story at the beginning.
So what is the work you do specifically with concrete?
I help measure the carbon footprint of concrete. Like
Really?
we're basically the leader in the United States and then ironically Australia for measuring the carbon footprint of concrete, and then move out of concrete into just about any other product. And that's basically what we do.
How do you measure the carbon footprint of concrete?
Yeah. There's a accounting practice called life cycle assessment, or LCA. And so it's similar to a financial accounting process where you're calculating based on, inputs. So like energies and fuels and transportation distances and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some, fancy software that empowers that accounting, but you put in inputs, software runs some numbers, comes out on the backside with a number. And then there's a reporting format. So LCA is the accounting. Then there's EPDs, environmental product declarations, that become like the form of reporting to communicate this. And that's the kind of stuff federal government, LEED, state of California, some big A&D firms that build projects, they require these things. They say, hey, you must have EPDs for these products in order to work in our buildings.
Yeah, the whole sustainability thing is a funny world, because I think everybody agrees, and I certainly agree, that, yeah, we should be more sustainable. But I feel like there's a lot of nonsense in the world as well. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, and there's a lot of people making a ton of money on stuff. I don't know, you just look at it all, you're like, I feel like there's some monkey business afoot here. I can't put my finger on it because I'm not nearly as educated as I should be on it. But like for engines, for example, like diesel engines, there's been a big push to make them more efficient, yeah. One, but then capture the emissions too. They can't have emissions because they are killing polar bears. So they do this, and I watch all of the engine manufacturers make their engines way more complicated to fit these regulations, and they make a ton of money on it. And then they pass all of that cost onto the consumer. But the consumer is not sitting there like, hey, let's be more efficient. We're all in this together. They just want to do their job. But then the big corporations are the ones with all of these ESG goals that they have to. I feel like you almost have to have ESG goals as a big corporation.
Keep in mind, there's another dynamic to this too, is regulatory.
Yes.
Engine manufacturers have been pressed for a certain amount of, efficiency and compliant and emissions. So whether or not the diesel technology that we're looking at is the best technology or the technology that helped them navigate the regulation. I mean, sometimes there's two sides of the ESG and sustainability space. Primarily, it's been voluntary. It's companies who want to do good, or they're competing in a marketplace that requires them to do good in order to compete in that marketplace. And then there's like the government steps in with its heavy hand and says, you must. Mm-hmm. And then people kind of deal with that. I sort of like the voluntary side of it a little better because it's a little pure. I think, most people would agree. Usually when the government get involved, it's not the best thing. They don't always get it right. Uh-huh. And I think that's the fear going forward is, we've got this big package of climate money out on the street. Let's hope it's effective and that there's not funny business and games and other things that go into that. But let's hope it's meaningful and does some good in the world.
Because historically, there's been a lot of funny business. all the climate money spent has not exactly gone to a lot of good stuff.
Well, it hadn't been much
Yeah.
historically. I mean, the U.S. really hadn't put a lot of climate money forward. They've invested in programs for energy efficiency, or they've invested money in different categories. But this is really the biggest, really one of the first times they've taken a big cut. They've implemented some policies and other stuff, but I can't really think of a ton of money that was spent purely climate related.
So where does the money go?
In this bill?
Money? Yeah.
So there's a big chunk for decarbonizing the built environment. So some of the things we were talking about, looking at lower carbon materials, that's a big play. There's a big push toward this low carbon concrete, since concrete and essentially the cement in concrete has a big part of the impact.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a chunk on buildings for materials. So if you're manufacturer of building materials, there's money to be able to show that your products have lower footprint. There's money on the building side. The GSA got a whole bunch of money to lower the impact of federal buildings in terms of what they're building. That's going to include ports and office space and airports, courthouses, things like that, where there's federal GSA money associated with that, General Services Administration. Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration for infrastructure. So think like roads, bridges, as we put some of that infrastructure money back into play, the infrastructure money came with some climate stipulations, lower carbon concrete, lower carbon asphalt, lower carbon steel. Those are all sort of provisions that are attached to that money.
What is how do you make lower carbon concrete?
Less cement.
That's basically, yeah.
Basically, that's
cement.
Yeah, less carbon intensive glue.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's some other additive mixtures. There's some technology, like there's a technology that you replace some cement content by adding carbon dioxide back into the concrete in the curing process. But there's some cool stuff around concrete.
So you're using it as a carbon sink?
Yeah, basically.
Huh. Concrete does have the emissions from the concrete industry. It is pretty significant.
It's one of the chunkier ones in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I feel like they kind of fly under the radar. But then again, you can't do much without concrete. It is like the Lego brick of the world,
no doubt.
And so it's kind of a tricky one. You're like, well, we still need to create this, but the problem I'm having, especially with the cement's a good one. There's big cement shortages right now.
Yep.
Why are there cement shortages? I guess you're more. I'm just gonna say something dumb about it. You're closer to it than I am.
I all I know is that there hasn't been a lot of. We're building a lot. There hadn't been a lot of new cement plants that come online in a while, and I think that's as far as I know in terms of why did we not build a new cement plant years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, well. And I think it's because the government just doesn't allow it. No. We can't have more cement plants. That's crazy. Those are very detrimental to the environment. So we're just not going to permit it anymore. And then here we are. Concrete, the consumption doesn't drop. Oh, they didn't build a new cement plant. Oh, I guess we're going to find a new material. Like it's concrete. There's not really a substitute for concrete for most things at the end of the day.
Correct.
And so we just sweep the problem under the rug to other countries that will promote this or produce the cement, and then they ship it to us. But then doesn't that increase the carbon footprint at the end of the day?
I think transportation burdens sometimes get overviewed as it's almost like the local example. Like, well, I bought local. And it's like local meaning the thing didn't have to travel as far.
Yeah.
And, that's the good. Does that always equate to, it was lower carbon total, like had a total lower carbon footprint? No. Sometimes it does. Concrete's one of those funny things is you're not really going to make concrete here in Nashville and be like, all right, fire the truck up. We're driving to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
There's physical property challenges with doing that. And two, it's simple of enough, product that there's plenty of production capacity in that region. So, the answer in sustainability and, carbon is sometimes like it's a math problem. Sometimes you have to run the numbers to figure out what the answer is. Sometimes it is. Sometimes a domestically produced product has a significantly lower footprint than a, internationally produced, and sometimes it's the other way around. Depending on technology, availability, energy grids. It's it's a multi-dynamic calculation, and it's not a ubiquitous always that less miles equals lower footprint.
Is it kind of math and kind of art to figure this out?
I think it's more math. I mean it's
like
more math than, it's an accounting discipline. So there's, of course, rules and there's decisions that you make in accounting. Whether to build the next year or build this year is a riddle for every business as we get to December. Do I want to pay taxes this year on the money, or do I wait till next year? Do I want to shift it, and depending on how systems and rules are set up, that can make a difference. But it's really math. I mean, it's data, then it's calculations, comes out the other side. There are some assumptions or decisions that the accountant gets to make, but it's math.
So a concrete company will hire you guys to figure out, like, how dirty is our cement? How dirty is our concrete? Is that kind of the question? Like, so where are we at so that we can say, if it's not, it's not. It's good stuff, and it fits these regulations?
So I think in your statement, you said dirty.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a judgy word.
Yes.
Right. Like what we see in this is that most companies are being asked to disclose the carbon footprint of different mixes so that a buyer, architect, designer, structural engineer, somebody can make a decision about what mix they want to purchase. So it's just a form of, the EPDs are actually called product transparency documents. Just think of it like a nutritional label. Putting 1,400 calories next to a nice caramel macchiato on the Starbucks menu just tells me something.
Yeah.
I mean, then I have to use judgment to determine that 1,400 calories for breakfast when I'm going to eat 2 more meals may not be in my best interest if I'm concerned about my weight, my weight.
Yeah.
So that's what most of the requests from concrete plants kind of sound like this. They say, hey, I'm competing on a job. I got an RFP. I got a specification that says I need to have EPDs for whatever mixes I'm going to propose. I need an EPD. Do you do that? Yes. Like WAP, EPD, put those things synonymously. Like, we're your guys.
So you're putting together the nutrition labels for materials.
There you go.
How is the steel market in the United States? How does American steel compare to other steel?
It's more by technology than U.S. versus China steel. So think like older energy source application into steel, like BOF,
coal
furnace, coal-fired, higher footprint. The new electric arc furnace, higher amounts of recycled content, lower. You've got, some companies like Nucor came out with a carbon neutral steel product, kind of adding some steel in there and then a little bit of carbon offsets to go with it. And that's kind of a first in the steel industry. What
does carbon neutral mean?
So back to the LCA math. So like, think of it as like stepping on a scale. So, I step on the scale, I figure out I got let's just call it 100 carbons.
Mm-hmm.
Carbon neutral would be doing something about the 100 carbons to get to 0.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a couple different options. You can reduce the footprint and start at a different point. Like you could take cement out, add an additive, put carbon into it and turn your 100 into 80, or you could turn your 100 into 50.
Yeah.
You could, have your concrete plant run on solar. You could have, the first, battery powered, electric solar, solar infused, concrete truck to deliver concrete to the job. Right. And that's just eating away at that 100 to get it down to a certain point. But at a point, it takes carbon to run the world.
Yeah.
So you've done everything you can. You're in a great spot. Technology doesn't allow you to get any further than that. And so this is where the idea of like carbon offsets or putting a cost on carbon come into play is you add that back into the equation. So say you get your footprint from 100 to 50, you buy your way from 50 down to 0 and internalize the cost of carbon to deliver that carbon neutral product to the market.
Yes. So you essentially buy part of it.
Mm-hmm. And we do that like,
yeah.
This is like this sort of exchange I mean, we do this on wetlands. People have heard of wetland mitigation credit. You're just swapping, I'm going to take this wetland away. I'm going to preserve another one.
We work with a mitigation company, actually. But where does that money go when you buy carbon credits?
Cool. So it's the idea is that a carbon credit can't come to fruition from a project unless there's this concept of additionality that says, you really need the sale of the carbon offset in order to make the project financially feasible.
Mm-hmm.
So say I was going to, take 1,000 acres and put it into easement and generate carbon offsets of it. I wouldn't do that unless I knew I was going to get the revenue for carbon offsets. That would make the project additional, as an example. If I could still do that and it didn't matter and the offsets just happened later, it's like an afterthought. The project would have happened anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So like a good example on that is in the renewable space. Wind and solar have gotten to a point where they're pretty palatable cost-wise. So generating carbon offsets from those don't really work anymore because unless there's really a unique situation, the economics work without the carbon offset revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that goes through like a verification process. It's fairly controlled. There's an exchange, sort of like a carbon offset stock market. There's brokers, buyers. It's a tradable currency.
See, that's where I feel like the witchcraft comes into play.
Tell me more.
I just don't understand any of it. I just don't get how it works.
Kind of like a stock, or what are these things we're trading now? Like the trying to explain cryptocurrency to my a parent or something like that. Like, or what's the like digital art?
Oh, NFTs.
Like I'm still kind of working my head around that. So it's in the same ballpark of that. As each carbon credit represents 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you retire the carbon credit, like when you say like, I've used it, I've spent it, like it's done, like meaning I've applied it to a project to say, hey, I want to be neutral. Here's one of the 50 carbon credits that I've assigned, but now by me transferring that, they're retired, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they become an offset. They come off the registries. They're done. They're dead. That's the end of them. They've been spent. And then new ones have to be generated in order to propagate that whole system.
Can you explain ESG? We've said ESG a bunch.
We have.
What is ESG?
Environmental, social, and governance would be what the ESG stands for.
Mm-hmm.
It is, it links very tightly to what sustainability has always meant. It's just has a little bit more of a governance and finance element to it. So the idea of ESG or sustainability, which sustainability was often translated into like people, planet, and profit. So planet, E,
mm-hmm.
people, S, and then planet, profit seemed a little harsh. So governance felt better.
Yeah.
So in the act, let's just hang on E and S for a minute, environmental and social. It's things like, caring about employees, caring about their wellness and their well-being. It's diversity and inclusion and equity. It's those sort of ideas that companies can be good social citizens and be socially responsible in the way in which they deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
The environment side is, what you would kind of expect. It's, it's resource conservation, energy, carbon, climate, water, those sort of environmental attributes. And companies have made claims about that. They want to, be less impactful on the environment, develop lower, impactful products and things. And that's been that has taken a lot of forms in different ways. The governance comes in as, 15 years ago when I got into the space, sustainability was treated like kind of like a, redheaded stepchild in the basement. It didn't have any board visibility. The CEO, of, a big company might have read an article once about sustainability or kind of heard the term. He stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So he's an expert. But like, it wasn't a top 10 strategic priority. They didn't really care. It wasn't, there wasn't budget for those sort of things. And so as companies have created, goals and targets and tried to do different things and develop more products, the governance piece is really kind of proof in the pudding. if a company has meaningful goals, meaningful targets, they're, using their words to say these things, and the highest level in an organization who's responsible for this is a, junior manager, it's a little different than, the chief sustainability officer has a role on the board and, has, visibility to the executive leadership team. And, his or her compensation is tied, to sustainability performance of the whole organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the governance piece is really amplifying. How believable is it that companies are actually committed to this?
I feel like a lot of them are committing to it though, because they kind of have to. I feel like there's some force out there forcing their hand because it just doesn't feel genuine in a lot of ways.
At the moment, the big force is investors.
Yeah.
Like, that's the money.
Yeah, money. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's like, why? I just don't get it. It seemed like it kind of just, especially the past few years.
We do a lot of work in like the oil and gas space, right? Because, the industry that maybe traditionally hasn't done as much in that space. But I mean, they're all in. Like they see the opportunities for this space. There's, companies working hard to decarbonize oil and gas. Like, oil could be made more efficient. Like we just haven't really ever focused. The industry never focused on that. So there can be, lower carbon gasoline that comes to market in the future. But one of the things that sticks with me is from a governance standpoint and ESG and why it's important is, there was a day and time, I think this is appropriate for the construction sector too, where, safety didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You meet, how many guys you met that have, 8 fingers,
Sure.
Or something else. Like safety wasn't a principle. It's at every job site now. There's posters, there's requirements, there's safety coordinators. Safety now is a huge thing, but 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't a thing.
It's a huge thing, but I feel like it's the teeter-totter is a little unbalanced. Then it's gone way in the other direction where it's like, how many forms do I have to fill out to walk across the job site? Like now we're getting in the way of progress in a lot of ways because we're so fixated on no mistakes. Safety is the utmost importance thing. We cannot zero this, zero that, which I agree with, but then I feel like it's also taken a little too far.
The parallel in the story is that these oil and gas guys are saying, hey, this kind of reminds me of safety.
Yeah.
What safety ended up meaning was that you were a good operator. Like you could put processes and procedures in place.
Mm-hmm.
There was correlation between safety rates and quality. Because if, people follow the rules, people also follow drawings, follow processes, follow designs, people found that there was correlation. Investors saw this. There was correlation between safety rates and profitability of projects. And then add in the insurance dynamic, as it's not cheap for people to get hurt, especially in a litigious society today, especially when the corporation incurs, most of the liability.
Well, and this is where I feel like it's disingenuous because I think that's the motivation for safety in a lot of ways.
The money is in the
money.
People.
It's financially motivated. So we avoid the liability. There's too much legal liability here. There's too much potential damage to our image. We just can't afford to have this happen. But they bill it as, but it's all about our people. Well, that's why we're doing it. We're doing it about our people, which there is some truth to that. But I feel like they ride in on their white horse. Like, we're doing this for you. Like, because you're our number one priority. It's like, I know that's not true. I know for a fact, American Airlines, you telling me my safety is your top priority. I know that's not true. I just know that you injuring me is bad for your business. So I wish you could and I know they can't say that, but I feel like I'm all for ESG, but I feel like that's kind of how it is. It's billed as this like prosperous future. We're just doing our part, but it's like, but, and in some companies like a Patagonia, absolutely. Like
Sure.
they're 100% aligned.
I think you're at different time points too. I mean, right now companies who get ESG are perceived as, they have a way to see trends, what's happening in the world and respond to that. Right? Like there has been early adopters, but like in terms of like the landscape, like people that are responding now on ESG are still very much on the earlier side.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many companies that, have nothing, haven't done a single thing. And, that's okay. They're not overly late. Like it's just, this is where we are. Like it's becoming mainstream.
Yeah.
And so I think, to parallel that to safety, there was a day and time where the early adopters of good safety practices were able to demonstrate. And then there was all the fast followers. And then there was everyone who came late because it went further and further in its former requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's, the consequences from a regulatory government back involved, probably has added to that disingenuine. We made a phrase to me one time when government gets involved and defines it as a rule, it becomes the line between legal and illegal.
Yeah.
And so the bottom comes up.
Yes. Which is good in a lot of ways. And then we also have lobbying. That plays a part too. Sure. I feel like there's no middle ground in the let's be more sustainable. Cause I think people are like, no, it's only going to be, it's only fossil fuel. That's the only way. Like we're always going to run on fossil fuel, or it's only batteries and ferries and windmills. That's the only way to do it. And I look as like, well, is there somewhere in the middle? Like, I think fossil fuels are a pretty good thing because that's why we're here. That's why we've populated the world as we have. It's a fantastic source of energy. But then we've also, I think, figured out that we can't just keep full bore on this path. But isn't there somewhere in between?
I think so.
I think that's where it should be. But I feel like it's either one or the other.
I get frustrated with the battery versus oil. Like it's presented in the world as ones and zeros.
Yeah, it's binary. It's binary. Right? It's like it's not binary. What is binary about that?
There's zero impact with batteries and there's 100% impact with gas.
Yes.
The math is actually like 20 to 30% apart. Like it takes energy to make a battery.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we forget this, right? Yeah. And so, it is really more toward the middle. And so, and I think there's things like I teach a class. I was teaching last night and, these guys are in a master's program for sustainability. I said, what does sustainability mean? And we started going through the list and, reusable, recyclable, organic, socially responsible, local. Yeah. Like all the terms. Right. And then I sort of like did like a fantasy football draft kind of deal. We wrote up like 40 terms. I was like, great. You get $5, put $1, $2, $3, $5 on the topics, but you have $5 to spend. You can't spend less than $5. You can't spend less than $1 in an increment. So what of all these terms you threw up here, what's the priority?
Mm-hmm.
Wrecked them.
Sure.
Absolutely wrecked them.
Yeah.
Why can't I have it all? That's not real life. You have to prioritize. One of those things is more important than the other. And so there is medium because we have resource constraints, we have limitations, there's economics, there's economies, there's all these things that draw down on that. And, that's, I think, where we are in the space. We're getting smarter about, the carbon piece for me is kind of, is a little bit empowering because for the longest time we do stuff of, sometimes we force recycling on things that have a way more carbon footprint. So the idea is, what did you do?
Yeah.
Did you save the planet? No, depending on your North Star and what you mean by planet. If you're concerned about climate change or anything related to that, and the recycling effort results in a 30% higher footprint, then all you did is prevent stuff from going into landfill.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you prevent climate change? No, you actually contributed to it.
Like a lot of paper products.
Some can be that in that bucket.
Yeah, people think cutting down trees. You cannot cut down trees. You're killing the environment. It's like corn. It's grown to cut down, and it's a carbon sink. You dummy. Like they soak up the carbon, and then you plant another one. Then they do the same thing.
Depends on the forest, but yes, and where you are. But this is the thing. Like,
but managed forests. The recycling
in a managed forest, absolutely. Like that's what it's a crop.
The recycling is a great example, though. Yeah, there's these narratives that just are not true a lot of times. Like people drive Teslas thinking that I think they're like cleaning the air as they go, and they just plug it in their wall, and it just all of that obviously is coming from solar and wind turbines, and that's not fossil fuel or anything like that because that's not how Teslas work. It's clean, but it's like, and then they kind of walk around like, yeah, I drive a Tesla. Like, I'm saving the environment. It's like, do you know anything about the power grid? Do you know, like, it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts.
I'm not going to hate on people for feeling good, but I agree with where you're coming from.
Yes.
I think, everyone can't walk around in a state of over-analysis where they can't, I don't know what to do because everything's so complicated. Like it's good that people, take runs and feel good about the things they do. But I think this is where the market and, it's almost not necessarily always it may not always be the consumer that has to make that choice. Sometimes these things can be made, the way companies produce products, the way that they present products to market, what they care about. And I think that kind of gets back to the heart of ESG of, if a company intentionally knows they're doing something that they could do better, then why keep doing the old thing? Mm-hmm. And so where does that practice? Who picks that up? Who can make that decision to change the organization? Who can actually, if it's the redheaded sustainability analyst in the basement, maybe they don't have the authority or the know-how. But if it's at the board level, if it's at the C-suite, like there's probably there's better shot. Yeah. Which is where that G and ESG comes back into play. Is you can look at a company how they're set up and figure out if they're going to have any chance of doing anything good.
Because it has to come from the top,
or just how they're structured. Make the argument. I'm sure. You can look at a general manager and owner of a football team and a coach and figure out if they're going to have a shot. Mm-hmm. Right? Just the front office staff is going to dictate that.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like the same idea is you can get a sense of when people are going to be successful based on how they set themselves up and how they govern it.
The interesting thing is in all of this is that, and this is where I think your efforts are quite aligned with just the blue collar world in general. The only way to a more sustainable world is through infrastructure. And like, that's it. I mean, if we want to go reinvent our power grid isn't on the internet. It's infrastructure. It's real stuff.
No doubt.
Made of real stuff that needs to come from somewhere. Which is why I'm so optimistic about the industry we serve, infrastructure, mm-hmm. natural resources, because that is always how the world is going to run, regardless of where it goes, what materials they want to use. Okay, you want more batteries? Great. We just got to pull more lithium out of the ground if you guys want to do that. And then we just have to set up, lithium recycling. Then we need to, gear up our infrastructure, build all these charging stations and redo the power grid. And if you want to do all this, that's great, but it's still all infrastructure at the end of the day. So regardless of how this goes, it still comes down to, if we want to be more sustainable as an industry or world, we need mm-hmm. to build more sustainable buildings. Okay, so you need to get rid of old buildings. You need to build new buildings. There's always building to make things more sustainable.
Yeah, I think globally speaking, the stat is 40% of global emissions are tied to the built environment, including infrastructure. So, I mean, it's massive. It's like half the pie. So you're right. I mean, if infrastructure and buildings can't figure out something, which I think is where the, predominant focus on concrete, asphalt, steel, I mean, some of those, high impact commodities worldwide, I think it's going to be hard to make a big dent in it. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, infrastructure plays a huge role in all of this.
It is amazing how I went to Switzerland and they recycle their concrete there. Mm-hmm. Here we just crush it. And if it can be used for road base per spec, great, throw it down on the road base. But it's not really recycled to my knowledge. But in Switzerland, it's all recycled into new concrete, mm-hmm. which I thought was fascinating. And you look at something like that, you're like, why aren't we doing that here?
Never been to Switzerland. Bucket list.
It's everything.
Need to go.
Everything. You go to a demolition site, everything is recycled. Huh. Everything is recycled. I went to a landfill where, because they have so little landfill space,
sure,
because they don't permit new landfills, it's all recycled, that they were processing the old C&D landfill, putting it through a processing plant, pulling out, I think, up to 70% recovering 70% of what was in the landfill, selling it off, and then putting the 30% back into the landfill.
Yeah, landfill harvesting has been talked about for a long time. There's landfills that do great jobs of compartmentalizing materials that basically become like new forms of quarries, if you will, down the road.
Yeah.
I don't think we've gotten thirsty enough to go there yet, but it's been talked about as,
No.
it'll give you a different perspective on waste management stock.
Yeah.
Not only are they a service, but, eventually they'll be a quarry.
Yeah. And I saw it. I mean, you see all the different piles of the metals they're pulling out of there, the concrete they're pulling out, the wood they're pulling out. I mean, all of it can go be turned into stuff. A lot of the wood actually went to a cement facility to go into producing cement. They burned wood
as a fuel source.
Yeah, as a fuel source rather than something like a Coke or.
Sure.
But asphalt actually is one of the most recycled products, if not the most recycled material
it's
in the
up
world.
There in the world. I mean, PET is making a run at it, but
what's PET?
Plastic bottles.
Oh.
Aluminum too is up there. So but asphalt has significant volume for sure.
Yeah, I feel like asphalt doesn't get a lot of credit, but you tear up asphalt, you put it into trucks, all of that's recycled.
Sure.
You're not throwing it away. It's valuable stuff, which is pretty sweet.
There's even in place, where you take it up and just basically, pull it up, put it back, pull it up in the front, put it down in the back.
I've actually seen that. We've worked with the company Granite Rock. They do it in California. It's pretty sweet. I'm not sure about the durability of the road after. I think the jury's still out on that, but it looks pretty slick.
Asphalt for me is one of those things that I'm learning more and more about, but the combination of, hot, warm, cold, the foams and binders and all the pieces of how you can, change the properties of asphalt and then the inputs. I mean, there's a lot to asphalt. There's a lot to asphalt.
A lot to asphalt and concrete. I mean, I had multiple materials classes in school. I went to engineering school somehow for whatever reason. And the materials classes were terrible because it's like, sweet, we're going to be mixing concrete. Like, here's some cement, here's some aggregate, a little bit of sand, mix it all together in a bowl. Like, we're going to build shit. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You're doing all your, you need to get your right size aggregate and what additives are we putting in and what's our compressive strength and okay, let's go break the cylinder now. It's remarkably tedious.
Absolutely.
And every place is different. Concrete in Nashville is completely different than like here. We put a lot of sand in concrete because that's the spec. Arizona, you don't put sand in concrete. That's crazy. Like, what the hell? What are you using sand for? Like, I saw they import a bunch of sand right here off the river. Yeah. I didn't like, why the hell are they using so much sand? There's a concrete plant right there. Go figure. It's really complicated.
It is. And that complication also creates the opportunities for, addressing it with new materials and things. I mean, we have companies all the time, they have, some, cooler, lower carbon format of a mousetrap or, sand or biosand or, some other, some of this stuff I don't even understand. But, it's the cool part is there's an innovation environment for it and, people are working at it. And I don't know, I think that stuff's cool.
There's kids that get their master's degrees in fast curing concrete. It's like, I've seen some of these posters. It's like, asphalt degradation in really, really, really cold environments. And they do a whole master's degree on that.
Just on that.
And so they're an expert on just that subject. And I don't understand it. I mean, it's way beyond my expertise. What do you do out in the field when you travel?
Mainly talk.
Yeah.
These sort of, conversations kind of like this, maybe a little more, formalized in a presentation and visuals, but that's explain, the big picture scenario of what's happening in the world and, how it applies to, individual companies or their products or, their industry as an example. So, I go to, state concrete associations. I'll be at, World of Concrete. I go to, the Green Build, which is the lead conference. It's a bunch of architects, designers, contractors, things like that.
Really?
Speak at those sort of things. So sometimes it's industry specific. Sometimes it's, more topical. But that's what I travel around doing mainly.
Well, it's only becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, we're only going in one direction.
I'm not less busy.
No. No, it's only going one direction, whether people like it or not. We posted a video the other day about how in California they mandate a certain emissions standard on diesel now as of 2023.
Sure.
So any heavy equipment needs to be up to a certain. It's based on a fleet average. So your fleet on average has to be a certain tier. So they're repowering a lot of these machines. These more complex diesel engines they're infamous for being way less reliable. Like because they have all the electronics, and if a diesel engine doesn't have, there's no computers, there's nothing to it. It's just diesel and power back in the day, at least. Now it's all computers and wiring harnesses and you have your DPF and all kinds of crazy stuff on there to make it emissions compliant, which takes an old, very reliable machine and makes it less reliable, but more efficient, fuel efficient. But that's the only way to operate that machine in the state. And so you have a bunch of people on the internet all upset about it. Oh, why would you do that? Because at face value, you're like, yeah, that does kind of suck. But then at the same time, it's like, okay, so are you just going to complain about it? Because, the governor, the state of California is going to, oh, wow, these people on YouTube, they just don't like this. So we need to reverse our policies. Like, as much as it's annoying, sometimes it's reality. And I think companies that do get on board with it are going to be better off than the companies that just, no, we're going to ignore this.
In all of this, I mean, back to kind of like we were talking earlier about like a math problem here. 2 of something tends to have a larger carbon footprint than 1 of something, right? Because you have twice as many.
Yes.
Right. So if in this push for lower emissions, and that's, particulate emissions associated with a diesel vehicle. But if durability is not there and you got to keep adding replacements, net, you didn't do anything. Right. And so, this is also, back to my concern of policy or concern of making sure that we get it right in terms of how we do these things. That's the risk. Like that.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm caught up in. It's like, yes, should we be more sustainable? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I see there's a lot of stuff that also doesn't make sense. But then you can't say, well, this is kind of dumb, guys. Like, what are we doing here? Or else like, oh, so you don't believe in climate, like global warming? You don't believe in climate change? I'm like, no, I do. I do. I agree. We need to be more sustainable. I totally on board with that. But can I also ask some questions over here? Like, is this really like, are we spending this money in the best way?
It's the right path. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's this gold rush. So you get all this money coming on board from investors, from governments. And that creates a little bit of trouble because there's a lot of grabbing here or there. I just want as much money as I can get. And some companies are great. They're doing amazing things. Other companies, it's like, that's where the monkey business comes into play.
And I think I agree. I mean,
but then you could argue
we're going to get some stuff wrong.
Yeah, but you could argue the benefit outweighs the bad stuff that happens. I don't know.
We're so we've become such a hypercritical society. Maybe we're saying Switzerland. One of the prime minister of Switzerland's getting all this flack for like dancing at a party topless or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yikes. Well, I mean,
but she said it's my personal life. I can do what I,
Sure.
All right, whatever.
Yeah.
One little thing, and we, cancel people for getting something wrong, as an example, right? Like, people make mistakes. Like, we learn. Like, that's part of the ways we evolve as a society.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Will all of the money from this Inflation Reduction Act be exactly right? No, not a chance. When has that ever happened on anything?
Yes.
Right. Did we get all the COVID money right? Did we get all the previous stimulus money? No, of course not.
We were just talking about the $50 billion to the airlines. I'm like, I don't even know where that money went.
Yeah, exactly. So we have that. I think overall, it's trying. It's an effort. It's a run. We're making a pass at it, and we hadn't done that. And so I think we'll figure out how that all plays out. But I we're trying, which I think there's a lot of credit that should go to that. Like we're trying.
Yeah.
Effort.
Yeah.
Effort's cool.
Sure.
I think effort's good.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. It's a complicated issue.
No doubt.
I've spent years trying to wrap my head around all of this, and obviously, based on this conversation and how incoherent I am, you can tell I have not at all gotten my head around it, because there's just so much to it. And I think, like you said, treating it as a binary issue, like a lot of people do, is a total. I think that demonstrates how little you know about this stuff. If you do say it's either one or the other, it's like, no, that's not how it works. That doesn't. It's a system. It's a complex system, and there's a lot of things at play here.
Yep, it is. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this, I don't know, more than 15 years, and probably the thing I work at the hardest is finding new ways to communicate and explain it. Because you're right, it's complicated, and so breaking it down, trying to make sense of it. I'm talking way too many analogies. My team's probably, they roll their eyes at that kind of stuff. But
you've had some good analogies.
I try.
Like football team analogy. That's great. It makes perfect sense.
I give it a run.
Yeah.
I give it a run. They tend to work. I get nods sometimes. Like, I get that.
Yeah.
But that's how, keep going. Do what works.
Yeah. I'm learning about it from all different angles. I actually have a book on my desk or at home. It's called Fossil Future.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm reading a lot of,
Sure.
World Economic Forum, and we need
deep.
carbon credits.
Getting deep, yeah.
Oh yeah, we need carbon credits at way more than they are right now. We're never going to make it. This and that, and then I'm going to the other side too, where it's like, no, just so you guys understand, fossil fuel is actually a key part of decarbonizing. It sounds counterintuitive, but we can't just turn this faucet off, which I think is his thesis. And then you kind of just put it all together. You're like,
an old phrase like investment follows strategy, or strategy follows investment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put a dollar price on carbon, you tend to focus on it because you spent money on it.
Yes,
and that's one of the what to that line of what is the, should we put a price of carbon? Is it too cheap? Is it just right? I mean, for parallel, the European Union has a regulatory program, and the cost of carbon just hit $100 like this week. So like that's a new high. Like it hit a top.
Yeah.
Because demand and then reduction and the requirements for that are all kind of looped in. So, at a metric ton at $100, I mean, that's, it sounds chunky. On like, an average product like the chair you're sitting in, that might be a quarter in carbon on a $1,500 chair.
Yeah.
It's pennies in cost in terms of goods. I mean, it sounds high at $100, but it's like, that chair's got, a very small percentage of a metric ton.
The European Union is a good example though, because they, I think, went a little too aggressive on, we need to decarbonize, shut down all the coal power plants, shut down nuclear too. Like, let's just shut everything down. And then now it's like, so like, what happened to your gas prices? And now you're in this war, but no, we need to pipe more of this stuff in, because if we don't have your gas, we're screwed. So we've shut everything down, and now they're starting stuff back up. It's like, I don't want to go down that path of being a little too irrational and a little too aggressive, like living in a world that we want it to be, not reality. Like living in this other world that we think is, but isn't at the same time.
Yeah. There's a sweet spot to that, right? Like you wait too long, then you're, a dinosaur. There's no competitive advantage.
Yeah.
You can't get, maybe you don't have the IP related to the collateral. I mean, look at the history of America and the amount of invention we had. I mean, play that out. Like, if we sit on the sidelines and just do what we've always done, we miss out on some of those innovations. We that technology, those companies that, seed themselves to solve that future. I mean, that's a risk, if we wait too long. But, being an early adopter and investing, billions or trillions in a technology or a path that doesn't really net out, that too is a risk. So there's timing, right? Timing's everything. Finding the right sweet spot of, when do we leverage when do we push in and say, hey, now's the time. Let's do that. So, maybe maybe some of our coal plants are a little long in the tooth in the States. Maybe, maybe our steel industry is due for some, innovations in new steel mills. Maybe like we finally timed out those assets that it's time to bet the new technologies. timing.
Yeah. Well, it's on coal's a funny one because you can build a much more efficient coal power plant nowadays, but they haven't permitted a new one in decades. And so they don't allow you to do it more efficiently. They've just ruled it out altogether. Same with like a blast furnace.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't just
do it.
You can't build a blast furnace,
Yep.
even though you can do it way more efficiently. So that's where the irony comes into play. So now these companies are just running their very inefficient blast furnaces that were built in the 30s or whatever it was.
Legacy.
Yeah, because that's all we can get. Because once this goes away, it's either a mini mill or nothing, or just send it to China.
And eventually that technology may make a great parallel is with like the Concorde plane that used to fly like New York to London in 3 hours or whatever, right? It got to a point where it was so fuel inefficient that it didn't make sense to fly anymore. And some of the big planes as well, like they still work.
Yeah.
It just costs so stinking much that you can no longer have the competition doesn't make any sense.
All big planes are done now.
Yeah,
like A380s.
A3, like a great example.
Yeah,
so same thing with like the BOF plane. At some point, the technology moves on. Like we move on from technology all the time, and so we'll do that. The question is when. How much do we hold on to it? How much do we hang on to it? What's the supply and demand, and how do we navigate that? But
the technology moves on, but then you have somebody like China that's like, we'll build as many blast furnaces as we can. Well, sure, we'll refine everything for you. Sure, we'll build all these coal plants. Like, we'll do it all for you. And then, so we ship like our copper, for example, key to any kind of sustainability whatsoever. That's as critical as it gets for a sustainable future. You don't do a whole lot without copper. It all goes to China to get refined because we won't build anything here to refine copper. And then it comes back as copper. So we're basically like, we sweep a lot of stuff under the rug too, to make us feel better about, well, we don't do it here.
I wrestle with this too, because there's part of me that, there's out of sight, out of mind in this regard. So part of that was deemed by environmental regulation, right? So China, we created, regulation against coal and steel in the 80s, and then that China picked it up.
Yeah.
There were other forces at play, but that's how I kind of understand it. That's the story I was told. I grew up in Ohio, Southern Ohio. We were a steel town.
Yeah. Rust Belt.
Like I didn't own sunglasses. Didn't need to. Wasn't bright. And so we shifted all that pollution to another country. And now, that country's figuring out that, it's messy, and so they're making moves against that. China isn't just sitting, China's not, not observant on climate, despite whatever's said. We support clients globally, and, that is an active market. So China gets it too. And they know they've done a lot of damage, and they've done, they've hadn't been as conscious about that. They've been so focused on growth, and so, that parallel, but now, newer technologies are coming back, or, a little bit more importance in materials and products that are built here, I think is where we are post-COVID. So let's reinvest with good technology.
Well, I think that's been a benefit of COVID was, holy shit, we sent a little bit too much out. Yeah. And like, look at all the material shortages right now, killing everybody. It's like, dude, we should actually do some of this here because there's a benefit to it. Like, yeah, no kidding.
And the technologies are different now. So the same reasons they left aren't the same reasons why we can't bring them back.
Yeah.
And I think that's, that sometimes I don't know. To me, that's a fascinating kind of market change. And we'll see where that goes. Where, can we build back, not to play on the political turn, can we build back better? And can we take back the things that we want? At the end of the day, though, from a climate perspective, whether or not the dirty steel is being made in China or Pittsburgh, it's still just one Earth.
Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't matter. It's still part of the system.
Yeah.
So it's just moving cups around.
So much here. I don't know. It's Friday afternoon. I only have so much mental energy to explore all of this.
the global dynamics of planetary powers.
It's wild. It's really wild. It's wild how it's politicized. It's wild how it's one versus, us versus them.
Oh yeah. Drives me crazy.
It's wild how it's geopolitical. Like especially, like look at Russia, oh, we're just going to cut them off. Okay. And just watching how energy markets adapt to huge geopolitical decisions. Like now, India and China, like bring your cheap gas, like come on down, man. We'll buy as much of it as you want, like as you can give us. This is fantastic. And then they're selling it to other countries that don't want to buy from China. It's just, it is so, I've always really enjoyed like energy markets. Mm-hmm. I find the sustainability topic fascinating. It'll be interesting to see how it moves through the construction industry because it's on its way through it. It
got accelerated, with this Inflation Reduction Act. I think this topic is going to be, more of a theme here as that money starts to trickle out, as people start to, you'll hear stories of people saying they didn't get jobs or they didn't win things because their carbon footprint was too high. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, we're not really that far off of that. Because there's money to, inform those sort of buying decisions, as part of these projects.
That's crazy.
That's weird.
We haven't been there. Crazy.
We are totally in an age of competing on carbon. Like we're there.
But I mean, to draw to your safety parallel, safety is a significant component of large jobs being awarded now.
Safety, and I mean, there's safety clauses in probably everybody's safety contracts. If you have X number of incidences or this, that, and the other, then we have the right to terminate this contract.
Yeah.
You don't do safety, then there's consequences associated with that.
And now it's, if you don't do sustainability, you don't get the work.
It's the parallel.
I have mixed feelings about all this.
I'm sure you do. I didn't make the rules. I'm just telling you what's happening.
I know. I know. I don't know who to be frustrated about. It's just like this specter just kind of floating through the air. I can't put my finger on it. It's just faceless. You're like, it's coming from somewhere, but I don't know where.
Right.
Huh.
Bill Gates. Just go. Bill Gates.
It's George Soros.
Soros.
Yeah. Soros.
It's the easy path.
Yeah. And Klaus Schwab.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, if you like look up evil villens, like he kind of just looks like an evil villain.
It fits the look.
Yeah. Bill Gates is like Bill Gates. Like he's like, he's just Bill Gates. He's a computer guy. You can look at that guy. You're like, yeah, he's up to no good.
Until he goes like getting costume and getting his cave and Bruce Wayne looked pretty normal.
Yeah, that's true. See, yeah, Bill Gates is fooling us all.
Like international.
Got me fooled. The bull is over my eyes right now. Well, thanks for stopping by. I don't know if this conversation was worth anything to you or people listening, but I got a lot out of it.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. For, anybody in the construction space wrestling with the any of these requirements, carbon materials manufacturers, I don't know how deep the listening base is, but that's who we're a valuable resource for.
Yeah.
That's that would be my hope.
What is your company again?
WAP Sustainability.
WAP. How do you feel about Cardi B's WAP song coming out? The brand is already there.
It did. I mean, there were a lot of pros and cons for us in this. So like one is like our search traffic went up tremendously on our website. Like we had way more clicks in, but our bounce rate was terrible. They were there, like not the WAP I was looking for. See you later. We had a plethora of clients and prospects and people we were working with. Like, I think I've heard of you, and you're like, have you? But I'll take it. Like, they say like, no, there's no such thing as bad PR.
My kids were talking about you the other day.
Right. We have, for any like, published media we have that beat, Dun, 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 dun,
yeah. I would just lean into
it. We have. And then our swag has been we can't keep it in stock. So we leaned in, certified carbon geeks 7 days a week, if you know the song. Like that's been
wow.
a new tagline.
No kidding.
Developed another line for like certified LCA geeks 7 days a week.
No kidding.
Certified ES&G geeks. So we have like a whole collection.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, it's been.
It was like a collab.
Yeah, we haven't quite, reached out. But there'll be a point in time where maybe she's less popular and more affordable for a collab.
Invite her to the Christmas party.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Well, yeah, this was interesting. I didn't. Just the fact, the one simple fact that this is coming to the construction industry, and this will start seriously affecting how companies are awarded projects and how projects are built. That. It's not alarming, but it is like, whoa, okay, that's different, and that's going to change a lot of things.
And everywhere, the federal government stuff, ports. One of the first projects they were looking for was like lower carbon concrete to finish out the border wall construction. No joke. Yeah. And then
I saw that. I went down to that project.
Did you?
Yeah, it was wild. Like one of the craziest projects I've ever seen, just from an engineering
scale, or
from a scale standpoint, engineering standpoint. Wild.
Huh.
Yeah.
Need to check it out.
It was well, I like going to for some reason infrastructure is political. Well, but that was very political.
That one in particular.
For obvious reasons. Yeah. But I like political projects. I like actually going to see them because reality is oftentimes you see what you're being told about it, and then you go there. You're like, there's a discrepancy here. There is a difference. This is reality. I'm staring at it right now. And it's like, I get both sides here. Yeah, I understand.
Instagram versus reality.
Yeah.
Like in real life.
Yeah. But I'm in the infrastructure world, so I'll see these things in reality. I'm like, this is a little bit different than what they say it is. But anyway, so they used low carbon concrete on the border.
So border, there's some of the big tech groups have, we've seen, in weird market, like people sometimes think this stuff is all affiliated with, New York, Boston, Seattle, like, anywhere that Amazon, Google, Facebook, now Meta, are building data centers, like that's a component, a lot of concrete in data centers. So, and that's hitting, weird, small, middle America markets. It's not, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, it's all just primary markets, no, that's where it's infiltrating the most is into, more rural, smaller parts of the country. And then, big markets still have stuff like California has a bill right now to require, if you have 8 units or more than 10,000 square feet, you have to know the carbon footprint of just practically everything.
Really?
For any built environment project. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I've enjoyed this.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Me too.
Thanks for coming by.
Good chat.
I don't know if it was a good chat from my end, speaking for me here, but yeah, I thought it was a great time. So
likewise, we'll do it again.
All right. Well, that's podcast.